everyone, welcome to a special edition of the Looney Toony Time with Maple Sugar and Crêpes Suzette. We have a very, very special guest with us today, Steve, okay, Steve Simons. And you're going to be amazed by Steve and all the information that he has for us. And could you give us a little bit of your background, Steve?
Sure. A number of years ago, I started researching the tactics and strategies of activist organizations and their effect on natural resources and natural resource communities and natural resource people. And I developed a program. So I call it Resource Ed, and it's resource people helping resource people. And the idea behind Resource Ed is to resource people with some information. Let them know, what's going on behind the scenes, why have public attitudes changed that, and what can we do about it?
Right.
And that's the key piece, and what can we do about it? And in the course of doing all that, I've studied strategy, psychology, sociology, everything from purpose through to tactics, and I've used all that study to reverse engineer or deconstruct activist strategies and then reconstruct resource organizational strategy. And now the new program I'm working on is developing training for grassroots resource people.
Absolutely. And that is so pertinent for our times right now.
Absolutely. Yeah. So you see, we're coming to you live from Victoria, British Columbia, and I'd just like to point out that some of us do have a brain out here. We're not all crazy, we're not all anti-pipeline. In fact, Steve and I met at that wonderful rally that we did a video about, and he was the MC there. Did a great job too.
Great job.
Thank you.
Yeah. So Steve, we discovered, has more knowledge than we can pack into one show. So we're going to be doing spots with him once in a while so that he can inform us. What I love is that he breaks down the strategies and tactics that are used by the left. And when we know that, then we can either counter by using the tactics in reverse or by diffusing them. So maybe, what is that called? You were going to talk to us today about something called polarization, which is one of them. So we'll get you.
Certainly. I mean, polarization is really just division, but it's an extreme form of division. And, I kind of get a little bit of flack when I go into resource communities and I talk about polarization because it's so sciencey sounding. And there is actually a science and a structure behind it. There's a psychology and a structure behind it. But really, it's just about division, and it's extreme division. Mm-hmm. And what do we see in British Columbia? Well, what we see in Canada is a growing belief system that you have to choose economy or environment, one or the other. So those are the poles in polarization. Oh. One versus the other, and there's a narrative that is perpetuated by I call them professional activists, I call it special interest organizations. They claim to, these are organizations that claim to be speaking in public interest. Well, they're private interests, and if you actually reverse engineer their strategies, they are very much so private interests. And so, I wanted to understand how they were so effective. How have they been so successful at changing their narrative in a country like Canada? People in so many resource towns, outside of the major centers like Toronto or Vancouver, Canada's rural, but yet we see a great deal of influence coming from those metropolis centers that are influencing the livelihoods of people in the rurals. And so I wanted to understand that. So that gets to the science and the structure of polarization, extreme division.
And is that they're telling us that we need to be good to the environment or use our natural resources. But we say, why can't we have both?
And that's the reality. I mean, if you step back from what looks like a battle, a polarized battle of us versus them or economy versus environment, the real world works in a way that we can't have both. And Canada has a very rich history of doing both. And in fact, is a leader amongst nations.
Yes.
As Canadians, as resource people, one of the things that I talk about polarization is to break down, from taking on a hard position and backing up those hard positions with, their facts or the other guy's facts. It's what I call fact fighting, which doesn't do anything other than make the other side dig in harder. That's actually a trait of a telltale trait of polarization is when one party is throwing out an argument, the other party actually isn't listening. They're not listening to understand. Yeah. They are digging in harder, and they will actually go to their way to find other arguments to counter what's going on. Exactly. So you have to go down to a deeper level, and that is understanding people's values and what they value. And that's the way you can start bringing Canadians back together, and that's what I teach. I try to teach inclusiveness. I try to teach a way to get beyond just the arguments and get to a place of understanding what is it we're trying to accomplish as a country.
Absolutely.
Economy and environment. Economy, environment, and community.
Right. I'm recalling at the rally when there were counter protesters there.
There were 12 of them.
12 of them. But
not that I was counting.
No. And we had about 500 people show up. It was a great turnout. But I love how you addressed that, that we have maybe more in common than you realize. We welcome all opinions. And that's the thing, is that it seems that the left is trying to shut down discussion. Why can't we look at both sides?
Yeah, and what I found in the research is when you go through and break down some of the professional activists' approaches, their solution to the world's problems is to
stop everything.
Stop everything.
But and you see that where I question it is why? Like, what's the motivation? I mean, they say it's because the environment and climate change and whatever, but what's the real agenda back there? Like, why do they want everything to come to a screeching halt when it comes to business, energy, whatever else in Canada?
But our proposal is to innovate, invent, evolve, to create. The other side is to stop. Is to not evolve. It doesn't create anything. It doesn't actually change anything. It's a bit of a Luddite kind of mentality, stopping time.
Exactly.
But if we look at the two proposals, one proposal actually does make the difference. And I always say we get more done on this side of the protest line.
Well,
and it's true.
Yes.
It's true.
Absolutely, because we are the innovators. The private sector contributes to the innovation, the creativity. I always say the private sector, that's what it's about. The public sector is a bunch of people who don't have those qualities, so they feel they want what this side has, so they steal it. Yeah. Hence politicians. But it's certainly very interesting. So polarization, then, we could say, is pitting one thing against another to create a belief that you can't have both.
Right.
You can only have one. You can only have a good environment, or you can have energy, but you can't have both.
Right. It's marked by absolutism, right? So it has to be one absolute or the other, or it's an ultimatum. It's ultimatum thinking. If you want this, then you can't have that. And it's not.
Could we say that the left is a little bit playing God?
Well,
it's like, you guys are too stupid. We need to take over, and we're going to decide how it's going to happen here.
Well, I think there's degrees of that. They don't think people can think for themselves.
Exactly.
And, but my experience and of course research and I think our collective experiences, we've always figured out a way to solve problems, and that's what people do. It's not just resource people, a lot of people. I have faith in humanity that people will. You challenge somebody around CO2. There was just a news article the other day that there's been a Harvard professor and some British Columbians that have figured out a way to take carbon CO2 out of the air and convert it into a fuel. that we can enter gasoline or diesel. And this is happening in Squamish in British Columbia. So I mean, you challenge people, you give people a challenge, they will rise
Yeah,
to that.
absolutely.
That's
They will
right.
rise. They will
That's
figure
right.
it out.
That's
And that's learning. That's evolving.
Absolutely.
That's taking on a challenge. That's not being afraid.
Absolutely.
Stop everything is being afraid.
Now, what's really interesting is that this man has curriculum, and he's working hands-on with the energy industry. He meets with the industry leaders and equips them. You were saying it's to resource people, and I love that. And so where would one be able to find more information?
I have a website, and I can provide a link, and maybe you can.
I'll put it at the bottom.
On your link,
yes, we always do.
It's I haven't. I mean, I'm not that. I'm an old guy learning new stuff as far as the web goes.
Me too.
and so I don't have a proper domain, but there's a way to get there. I do a lot of direct work.
We'll put it in.
I do a lot of direct work, but really what it is teaching people to think differently about the problem we're facing right now.
Exactly.
And giving people the reassurance that there is another way of thinking about this stuff as well. That we're not just captured in this cycle. It's about breaking the cycle.
Exactly. It's changing the world view on energy.
Yeah, well, and it starts with our own thinking on it.
That's
right.
right.
So what I try to provide CEOs and executives in mining, forestry, oil and gas, and agriculture is another way to view their value to society, because right now it's captured. So what I teach resource people to think is let's not just think about the raw resource to the product, the input and the output. Let's talk about the outcome, and that does something really amazing for us, because we talk about the outcome. The outcome is housing for people that's affordable. It's energy for people that's abundant and affordable, right? These are all the things that equalize and create freedom for people.
Absolutely.
And when we compare it to the outcome of stop everything, if we were to stop, what's the outcome? More expensive. Only the
Going
only
back
the 1%.
to the Stone Age.
Sure, it does. It rolls society backwards in a big way, and it starts to unwind all the advances we've made in for humanity.
Absolutely.
And it doesn't protect the environment. Actually, it goes the other way. It actually
that's the reality of it.
For the environment.
Yeah.
So
having said that, Steve, you have so much information. We want to have you back on and touch on other points, because there are so many. And I hope you will go check out Steve's website. And until we have him on again, in the meantime, keep your stick on the ice, eh?
Bye.
Bye. God bless.